November 19, 1944, near Bulge, France. A thick morning fog lingered over the frost-covered fields as a German anti-tank crewman scanned the horizon through his sight. For 3 consecutive days, his unit had clashed with a group of American armored vehicles, and the events he now observed were tearing apart everything he had been taught about racial hierarchy. At the forefront of the American column, a Sherman tank, clearly damaged and trailing smoke from previous hits, pressed forward relentlessly. Through his optics, the gunner noticed the tank commander, an African-American soldier, standing exposed in the turret while operating the .50 caliber machine gun. His position made him an easy target, yet he continued firing with unflinching resolve. This man was later identified as Staff Sergeant Ruben Rivers, though the German soldier would not know his name until decades later, when historians reconstructed the battle. Despite having a grievous leg injury that left bone exposed, Rivers refused morphine, declined evacuation, and immediately assumed command of another tank to continue the advance with his company toward Gabling the following day. For 3 days, he endured a severe wound that would have incapacitated nearly any other soldier, maintaining leadership and combat effectiveness under circumstances that defied belief. What the German gunner observed before the tank's eventual destruction left a profound mark on him, not because of the violence, but because it directly contradicted the doctrines of racial superiority he had been taught since childhood. The courage and resilience exhibited by the 761st Tank Battalion shattered the assumptions instilled in him over years of indoctrination, demonstrating that these so-called inferior soldiers possessed a bravery and skill surpassing anything he had previously witnessed in 5 years of war. The entry of the 761st Tank Battalion into the European theater represented more than a mere addition to American forces. It symbolized a confrontation of fundamentally opposing worldviews, the rigid, racist ideology of Nazi Germany meeting its practical challenge on the battlefield. From their very first engagement at Morville-Levick, Belgium, in November 1944, the battalion's motto, "Come out fighting," was exemplified in every action, persisting through relentless combat until the conclusion of the war. For German forces, this presented a stark reality check. Many of the units facing them had been raised on a lifetime of racial indoctrination, taught that black soldiers were incapable of mastering complex machinery, lacked fortitude under fire, and would flee when confronted with danger. These beliefs were not casual prejudices, but formalized doctrines that shaped tactical expectations and operational planning. The 761st would spend 183 continuous days disproving every one of these assumptions in stark and undeniable terms. The battalion itself was officially formed on March 15, 1942, and activated shortly thereafter on April 1 at Camp Claiborne, Louisiana. Its creation was not motivated by progressive policy or an enlightened view of race, but was instead framed as a political measure intended to maintain morale among black soldiers, according to internal War Department documents. Once activated, the men of the 761st underwent nearly 2 years of intensive preparation before seeing combat, fully aware that white units were being deployed overseas after considerably shorter training periods. This extended preparation helped forge a unit capable of confronting entrenched prejudice while demonstrating extraordinary competence on the battlefield. While standard white armored units were typically deployed after just 3 to 4 months of preparation, the 761st Tank Battalion underwent a rigorous training regimen that stretched over 2 years. Every maneuver, tactical scenario, and armored warfare technique was drilled to perfection, as the soldiers understood that any misstep would reflect not only on themselves but on the reputation of their entire race. Commanding the battalion was Lieutenant Colonel Paul L. Bates, a white officer whose acceptance of the post had effectively ended any hope of a conventional military career. Bates, a World War I veteran, had observed the remarkable performance of French colonial troops in combat and believed that leadership should be based on skill, not skin color. After overseeing the lengthy preparation period, Bates concluded that the 761st was the most proficient tank battalion in the U.S. Army. Among the soldiers who exemplified this excellence was Staff Sergeant Ruben Rivers from Tulsa, Oklahoma. Standing over 6 feet tall, Rivers had grown up on a farm, which, according to Bates, gave him an almost instinctive grasp of terrain and battlefield tactics. The battalion also included men like Warren G. H. Cray, who would later earn the moniker Iron Man for his extraordinary resilience in combat. Perhaps the most renowned member of the 760 Honest, though he never saw action, was First Lieutenant Jackie Roosevelt Robinson. An exceptional athlete destined for baseball immortality, Robinson was barred from deployment after he refused to yield his seat on a segregated bus at Fort Hood, Texas, in July 1944, a stand that foreshadowed his lifelong fight against racial injustice. Following their intensive Texas training, the 761st received orders to deploy overseas on June 9, 1944, just 3 days after the D-Day landings in Normandy. They embarked on the British troopship Esperance Bay and reached England on September 8, 1944. After a brief period of staging and preparation in England, the battalion crossed to France via Omaha Beach on October 10, 1944, and was immediately placed under the command of General George S. Patton's Third Army. Patton's initial doubts about African-American tank crews were well known. In correspondence with his wife, he expressed skepticism that black soldiers could think quickly enough for the complexities of armored warfare. Yet by October 28, 1944, Patton had addressed the battalion directly, delivering a speech that acknowledged their historic role while emphasizing performance over color. The battalion's combat debut came on November 7, 1944, when they assaulted the German-held town of Morel-Levig, supporting the 26th Infantry Division. The defenders, a combination of Wehrmacht infantry and anti-tank units, anticipated an easy victory over what they had been told were inferior American troops. The fight lasted 4 intense hours. Inside the town, the lead tank commanded by King was disabled by a German Panzerfaust, wounding 2 crew members. Their comrades dragged the injured men to safety and proceeded to eliminate the enemy threat, maintaining the momentum of the attack. Captured German after-action reports, later found in military archives, noted with astonishment the precision and coordination displayed by the 760 Honest. Contrary to German expectations of chaos following the initial hit, the battalion executed a carefully orchestrated assault that systematically neutralized enemy positions. In another example of extraordinary valor, Staff Sergeant Ruben Rivers confronted a roadblock that halted his tank under heavy enemy fire. Risking his life, he exited the tank, rigged it to the obstacle with a cable, and remounted. Using the Sherman's power, Rivers cleared the obstruction, enabling the battalion to resume its advance and secure the town. Through their training, courage, and tactical brilliance, the 761st Tank Battalion not only proved their combat effectiveness, but also challenged deeply entrenched racial prejudices within the U.S. Army, earning their place in history as one of the finest armored units of World War II. In November 1944, the 761st Tank Battalion, an all-black armored unit known as the Black Panthers, was fully engaged in continuous frontline operations, marking a period of relentless combat that tested both men and machines. During that month, the battalion endured 183 consecutive days of missions without respite, sustaining significant losses. 24 soldiers were killed in action, 81 were wounded, and 44 were removed from duty due to non-combat reasons. Additionally, the battalion lost 14 tanks that had to be evacuated, and another 20 suffered varying degrees of combat damage. While these numbers provide a stark overview of the battalion's hardships, they do not convey the impression left on the German forces confronting them. Contrary to Nazi propaganda that predicted black soldiers would break under fire, the 761st consistently maintained an operational pace that rivaled or surpassed many white units, where standard USTX tank battalions were typically rotated out of combat after roughly 2 weeks. The 761st remained in continuous action, demonstrating exceptional endurance and tactical efficiency. German military intelligence records from this period, preserved in the Bundesarchiv, reveal growing uncertainty about the unit's capabilities. An 11th Panzer Division report noted that the enemy tank company operating in Sector 7 exhibited an unusual degree of vehicle maintenance and aggressive maneuvering, characteristics that clashed with prior intelligence expectations. The courage of the battalion was perhaps most vividly illustrated during the attack on the French town of Gibelin. On November 16, 1944, Staff Sergeant Ruben Rivers' tank struck a mine at a railroad crossing, inflicting a severe leg injury that exposed bone. Refusing medical aid or evacuation, Rivers took command of a different tank and continued leading his unit into the town, exemplifying extraordinary determination. His company commander, Captain David Williams, repeatedly urged Rivers to retreat for medical treatment, but Rivers insisted that the operation required his presence, declaring that a delay of 2 days would not change the outcome. Medics who examined his leg observed gangrene forming, yet the urgency of combat left no time for treatment as German fire pressed the battalion forward. Rivers's final act of valor occurred on November 19th when Company A advanced toward Bagalto. Encountering heavy enemy fire, Captain Williams ordered a withdrawal, but Rivers identified German anti-tank positions and radioed his intention to engage. Alongside another tank, he provided covering fire for the retreating company. During this action, Rivers's tank was struck, killing him and wounding his crew. Captain Williams immediately submitted a recommendation for the Medal of Honor, though the award would not be approved until more than 5 decades later. Later that month, the 761st was called to participate in the Battle of the Bulge, attached to the 87th Infantry Division to help counter the German offensive codenamed Operation Watch on the Rhine. The battalion faced some of Germany's most capable formations, including elements of the elite Führer Begleit Brigade, which had evolved from Hitler's personal escort unit. Combat in areas such as Tit, Belgium was exceptionally fierce, further complicated by the battalion's need to integrate inexperienced replacements. Many of these reinforcements were untested or considered unsuitable for standard assignments, yet the 761st continued to fight without pause. The Black Panthers confronted German Tiger tanks equipped with formidable 88mm guns, which outranged and out-armored the American Sherman tanks. In response, the battalion relied on superior mobility, tactical ingenuity, and the reliability of their vehicles to outmaneuver and sustain combat operations despite these disadvantages. By employing flanking maneuvers and maintaining more tanks in operational condition than their adversaries, the 761st repeatedly demonstrated that discipline, skill, and courage could offset the technological superiority of enemy forces. Through November and into December 1944, the 761st Tank Battalion not only endured extreme losses and grueling conditions, but also reshaped perceptions of black combat effectiveness within the U.S. Army and among opposing forces. Their performance during sustained frontline operations, including the intense fighting at Gibling and the early stages of the Battle of the Bulge, established the unit as one of the most capable armored battalions of the European theater, proving that resilience. During one engagement, Sergeant Frank C. Cochran, operating a tank under heavy fire, reported over the radio, "They struck me 3 times, yet I'm still pushing forward." By January 9, 1945, the town of Tillet had fallen into American control. The 761st Tank Battalion had played a significant role in halting the German counter-offensive, though the victory came with substantial losses. In February and March of that year, the 761st joined the assault on Germany's last formidable defensive line, the Siegfried Line. The battalion was temporarily assigned to support the 103rd Infantry Division during the offensive. Within days, the defensive fortifications were breached, prompting increasing numbers of German soldiers to surrender. By March 23, the Black Panthers had destroyed hundreds of enemy tanks and heavy artillery pieces, inflicted approximately 4,000 casualties, and captured a nearly equal number of prisoners. The fighting in Germany presented new challenges compared to previous campaigns in France and Belgium. The battalion faced soldiers defending their homeland with growing desperation. However, many German troops were now surrendering in significant numbers, particularly when confronted by black tank crews whose reputation preceded them. Propaganda had instilled fear among German soldiers, leading them to believe that capture by African American troops would bring merciless treatment, a fear that proved completely unfounded. The men of the 761st developed tactics to avoid revealing their skin too early, ensuring surrendering Germans would not panic and flee. Once prisoners were secured, they were treated in full accordance with the Geneva Conventions. In many instances, the tankers shared their own food and supplies with captured enemy soldiers. As the battalion advanced deeper into German territory in March 1945, they encountered civilians whose behavior reflected the deep indoctrination of Nazi racial ideology. Many Germans fled upon encountering the black soldiers, anticipating cruelty that never came. Throughout their occupation of towns and villages, the 761st maintained strict discipline. There were no acts of retribution, no looting, and no retaliatory violence, despite knowing the hatred these civilians had been taught to harbor. This professionalism confounded many local inhabitants who had expected the racially inferior troops to act in accordance with the savage stereotypes propagated by Nazi propaganda. The advance of the 761st continued amidst fierce combat, confronting formidable German tanks such as Panthers and Tigers, as well as determined resistance from SS units. Warren G.H. Cressy, nicknamed Iron Man, distinguished himself during this period, frequently conducting nighttime reconnaissance outside his tank with only an Garand rifle to gather intelligence. One of the most significant moments in the battalion's history occurred on May 2, 1945, with the liberation of the Gunskirchen concentration camp in Austria. Inside, the tankers found nearly 15,000 Hungarian Jews on the brink of death from starvation. The scene was harrowing. Emaciated prisoners, many unable to stand, lined the barracks, abandoned days earlier by the fleeing SS guards. Technician 5th grade Johnny Stevens recalled the moment vividly. These were people who resembled walking skeletons. Some tried to smile, some waved weakly, and many were crying. We shared everything we had: our rations, our chocolate, anything that could help. The irony of the moment was not lost. African-American soldiers, long treated as second-class citizens at home, were the ones delivering freedom to victims of racial hatred abroad. One 17-year-old survivor, Sonia Schreiber-Vites, captured the moment in her poem The Black Messiah, remembering a soldier she had never seen before. A black soldier stood at the doorway. I had never seen anyone like him. He would save me before I died. In that moment, I thought he must be the Messiah. By late April 1945, the 761st Tank Battalion had positioned itself to be among the earliest U.S. units to link up with Soviet forces in Europe. This historic encounter took place near Stageland, Austria, in early May, though sources differ slightly, citing dates ranging from April 26 to May 5-6. Tank crewman Leonard Smith experienced a remarkable moment when a robust Soviet woman tank operator enthusiastically approached, shouting greetings of America multiple times, and embraced him tightly, nearly leaving him breathless. Unlike some of their encounters with European forces, the Soviet soldiers, including female tank crews, expressed no astonishment at serving alongside black American tankers. Their focus was on the shared experience of enduring the fierce struggle against Nazi forces. The operational record of the 761st demonstrates exceptional resilience and combat effectiveness. Over a continuous 183-day deployment from November 7, 1944 to May 6, 1945, the battalion traversed 6 countries: France, Belgium, Luxembourg, the Netherlands, Germany, and Austria, participating in 4. According to the National World War II Museum, their engagements inflicted approximately 4,000 German casualties, destroyed numerous enemy vehicles, neutralized 31 pillboxes, 49 machine gun emplacements, and captured 29 anti-tank weapons. The unit itself endured almost a 50% casualty rate, losing 71 tanks out of an initial strength of 36 officers, 30 black, 6 white, and 676 enlisted men. Decorations for valor included a posthumous Medal of Honor awarded to Ruben Rivers in 1997, 7 Silver Stars, roughly 70 Bronze Stars, and between 246 to 300 Purple Hearts. Though official documents explicitly identifying the 761st by name are scarce, German reactions to black American soldiers are well documented. Captured officers often struggled to comprehend the battalion's effectiveness. One German officer, upon learning that only a single black battalion was responsible for the resistance they faced, refused to believe it. The battalion's consistent presence over 6 months created the impression of a far larger force. German prisoners frequently remarked on the unexpected combat proficiency of these troops, with interrogation records housed in the U.S. National archives showing a recurring sense of disbelief. One Wehrmacht sergeant admitted, "We were told that black soldiers would flee under fire. Yet they continued advancing even after we disabled some of their tanks." It defied all expectations. While the war in Europe officially concluded on May 8, 1945, the challenges for the 761st did not end there. Like their white counterparts, African American soldiers contended with the psychological aftermath of combat and the lingering effects of post-traumatic stress. However, in addition to these universal wartime burdens, they faced systemic racial segregation and pervasive prejudice upon returning to the United States. Staff Sergeant Floyd Dade Jr., a Texan and battalion veteran, reflected on this stark contrast in an oral history. "We had fought for democracy abroad, yet we were denied equal rights at home. Men who had destroyed enemy armor and helped liberate concentration camps returned to a nation where they could be barred from restaurants, forced to sit at the back of buses, and threatened by racially motivated violence." Ironically, German POWs held on U.S. soil were often treated with more dignity than the black soldiers who had captured them. Despite their extraordinary wartime service, the accomplishments of the 761st Tank Battalion went largely unrecognized for more than 3 decades. While individual medals were eventually awarded, the battalion itself was denied the Presidential Unit citation that many white units received immediately after the war. Recognition at the unit level only arrived decades later when President Jimmy Carter formally awarded the Presidential Unit Citation on January 24, 1978, acknowledging the courage, determination, and skill of these pioneering soldiers. The 761st Tank Battalion earned a reputation for exceptional bravery, professionalism, and steadfastness in executing highly challenging and perilous missions. Their achievements were formally recognized decades later, culminating in 1997 when 7 members of the battalion, including Staff Sergeant Ruben Rivers, were posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor. Over 50 years had passed before Platoon Sergeant Rivers himself received the nation's highest military honor on January 12, 1997. During the ceremony, President Clinton highlighted a long-standing injustice. No African-American soldier who merited the Medal of Honor for service in World War II had been awarded it at the time. The 1997 awards sought to correct this historical omission, honoring a group of men who cherished peace yet had demonstrated extraordinary courage when called to combat. One of the most striking shifts in perception involved General George S. Patton. Initially skeptical about the abilities of black soldiers, Patton's view of the 761st transformed significantly through first-hand experience. During the Battle of the Bulge, intelligence indicated that German forces were disguising themselves as American troops to ambush soldiers at checkpoints. To counter this threat, Patton assigned black troops, including the 760 Honest, to these critical posts, explicitly instructing them to engage any white soldiers acting suspiciously. This decision reflected a profound level of trust. Patton was entrusting the safety of his entire army to men he had once doubted could handle the demands of armored warfare. By the war's end, Patton had recommended the battalion for numerous commendations, acknowledging that, regardless of his personal biases, they were among his most effective units. Ironically, the systemic racism that delayed the 760 Honest's deployment ultimately became an advantage. While other battalions were sent into combat after only a few months of preparation, the 761st trained rigorously for nearly 2 years. This extended period allowed the men to achieve unmatched proficiency. They could perform complex maintenance tasks in complete darkness, internalize every operational detail of their Sherman tanks, and develop a cohesion that only comes from long-term teamwork. Lieutenant Colonel Paul Bates later noted that this unintended delay born from discriminatory policies produced perhaps the most thoroughly trained tank battalion in the U.S. Army, capable of executing maneuvers that would have been considered impossible for other units. While Ruben Rivers received the highest individual accolades, Warren G.H.H. Cressy, nicknamed Iron Man, embodied the extraordinary persistence and valor of the battalion. Surviving the entirety of the war despite multiple injuries, Cressy destroyed remarkable amounts of German equipment and repeatedly undertook perilous missions. In one notable instance, when his tank was disabled by enemy fire, he seized a 50 caliber machine gun mounted on a half-track to provide cover for his crew's withdrawal. Cressy often volunteered for the most hazardous operations, including reconnaissance missions behind enemy lines on foot. Though he survived the conflict, he, like many veterans of intense combat, struggled with what would now be recognized as post-traumatic stress disorder. He seldom recounted his wartime experiences, and it was not until the battalion received a Presidential Unit Citation in 1978 that his extraordinary contributions were formally acknowledged. The story of the 761st Tank Battalion is one of resilience, skill, and courage. Despite systemic barriers and entrenched prejudice, these soldiers not only proved their capability in battle, but also transformed perceptions of what African American troops could accomplish. Their legacy is a testament to professionalism, bravery, and the enduring pursuit of justice and recognition. One remarkable aspect of the 761st Tank Battalion that took German forces by surprise was their technical skill in vehicle operation. Nazi propaganda had long propagated the false notion that African American soldiers were incapable of handling complex machinery. Contrary to these prejudices, the 761st consistently demonstrated one of the highest operational readiness rates within the Third Army. Their effectiveness stemmed not only from rigorous and extended training, but also from the commitment of individuals such as Technician 5th Grade William Harvey, renowned for his ability to identify engine issues purely by listening to the sound of a tank. Maintenance teams within the battalion routinely labored through the night, often under enemy fire, to ensure their tanks remained combat-ready. German intelligence reports expressed astonishment when they observed Sherman tanks previously believed to be irreparably damaged returning to the battlefield in full working order after only a few days. The 760 Honest's ability to keep vehicles operational under combat conditions surpassed that of many seasoned, predominantly white-armored units. When confronting heavily armored German tanks like the Tiger and Panther, the battalion developed innovative tactics to offset the Sherman's relatively weaker 75mm gun, which struggled to penetrate frontal armor. Their strategy, nicknamed cat hunting, relied on sophisticated flanking maneuvers. One tank would intentionally expose itself to enemy fire, acting as a decoy to pinpoint the German position. Meanwhile, two additional Shermans would maneuver to the enemy's sides or rear, striking where the armor was thinnest. Executing this required exceptional coordination, skill, and bravery, as the decoy tank often faced destruction. These tactics proved so effective that they were studied and adopted by other American armored units. The 760 Honest's combat innovations significantly influenced the broader development of American armored tactics in Europe. During the Battle of the Bulge, they played a crucial role in lifting the siege of the 101st Airborne Division at Bastogne. While General Patton's relief of Bastogne remains widely recognized, the contribution of the 761st is frequently overlooked. Battling extreme winter conditions with temperatures plummeting to -20 degrees Fahrenheit, the battalion fought through entrenched German lines. They encountered not only standard Wehrmacht units but also SS formations desperate to maintain their encirclement. Surrounded and short on supplies, the 101st Airborne witnessed the arrival of the 760 Honest Sherman tanks breaking through enemy positions. One paratrooper later reflected that the color of the tankers was irrelevant. The sight of the armored support was a profound relief. Leadership within the 761st was also exceptional. Officers such as Captain Erwin McHenry, Captain John Long, and Lieutenant Charles Barber demonstrated outstanding tactical judgment under fire. Their authority was built not on rank alone, but on demonstrated competence and earned respect. Captain David Williams, commanding Company A, submitted more recommendations for the Medal of Honor than any other commander in the battalion, though systemic racial bias meant that most awards were initially denied or downgraded, only being properly recognized many years later. The battalion's success was amplified by close coordination with infantry units. Initially met with skepticism from white infantry formations, the 761st quickly earned admiration through their consistent combat effectiveness. During the assault on Climac, France, white infantrymen specifically requested support from the Black Panthers after witnessing their proficiency in earlier operations. The tank crews frequently placed themselves in considerable danger to provide direct support, saving numerous infantry lives. One sergeant wrote home praising their bravery and insisting that their heroism transcended race. The 760 Honest's aggressive approach was reflected in their extraordinary consumption of ammunition. Over the course of their deployment, the battalion fired more than 300 tons of rounds. This extensive use was not careless. It reflected precise, sustained firing supported by rigorous training. German after-action reports often noted the accuracy and effectiveness of the 760 Honest's tanks in sectors where they operated. As casualties accumulated, the battalion faced an additional challenge. Segregation policies meant a severe shortage of trained African American tank crew replacements. Many new recruits were unprepared, either lacking prior experience or having been rejected by other units, creating difficulties in maintaining the battalion's high standards of performance. Despite these obstacles, the 761st consistently demonstrated skill, courage, and tactical innovation, earning a place in history as one of the most capable armored units of World War II. The operational demands of the 761st Tank Battalion meant that seasoned crew members could rarely be rotated out for rest or recuperation. Fatigue accumulated rapidly, yet these soldiers continued to engage in combat because no replacements were available. This relentless strain fueled acts of extraordinary bravery, but it also contributed to a significant rate of casualties. The presence of the 761st presented a unique challenge to German propaganda efforts. Axis soldiers who encountered them often found their personal experiences at odds with the Nazi racial doctrines they had been taught. Reports from Wehrmacht morale officers in early 1945 noted that troops who had faced African American tank crews were increasingly questioning the validity of racial propaganda. Soldiers began to voice a simple but powerful doubt: if the Nazis' ideas about racial superiority are true, why are we being defeated by these men? This internal conflict or cognitive dissonance eroded the fighting resolve of many German units during the final stages of the war. Before being deployed to the European theater, the 761st trained under the segregated conditions of the American South. Most of the battalion's personnel conducted their exercises in southern states such as Kentucky, Louisiana, and Texas, where Jim Crow laws were still rigorously enforced. Black trainees faced systemic discrimination. Local businesses refused to serve them. Military buses enforced racial segregation, and their living quarters at Camp Hood, Texas, were located in the most undesirable area of the base, adjacent to the sewage treatment plant. Despite these adversities, the battalion developed an extraordinary sense of cohesion and mutual support. The men understood that their struggle was twofold: a fight against Axis forces abroad and against racial prejudice at home. This dual mission instilled a level of determination and focus that confounded German opponents who could not grasp or counteract it. Among the battalion's ranks, First Lieutenant Jack Roosevelt Robinson, better known as Jackie Robinson, would become the most famous. During training, Robinson famously resisted a white bus driver's order to sit at the back of the bus and was arrested. Lieutenant Colonel Paul L. Bates, the battalion commander, refused to endorse court-martial proceedings, yet Robinson was transferred to the 758th Tank Battalion, where the new commander was willing to process the charges. Robinson was ultimately court-martialed but acquitted of all accusations. However, the legal proceedings prevented him from deploying with the 760 Honest. He received an honorable discharge in November 1944 and would go on to break Major League Baseball's color barrier in 1947. Recognition of the 760 Honest's contributions continued long after the war. On November 10, 2005, Fort Hood, now Fort Cavazos in Texas, unveiled a monument honoring the battalion. The memorial consists of 4 black granite panels surrounding a life-sized marble sculpture of a kneeling tank crew member atop a pedestal, with a tank engraved on one side and a panther on the other. Surviving veterans, their families, and military officials attended the dedication. The keynote speaker emphasized that the battalion's fight symbolized not only victory over Nazi Germany, but also the affirmation that all Americans, regardless of race, could serve their country with distinction. Validation of the 760 Honest's reputation came from an unexpected source: former German soldiers. In the 1990 seconds, historians conducting interviews with ex-Wehrmacht veterans about tank combat repeatedly encountered references to highly skilled American units. When pressed to identify these units, the veterans often singled out the African American tankers, praising their aggressive tactics and combat proficiency. One former German tank commander summarized the sentiment succinctly: "They fought like devils." These acknowledgments underscored that the 761st had earned respect even from their former enemies, highlighting their extraordinary skill, courage, and resilience under both combat and societal pressures. For a long time, it was puzzling why African American soldiers would fight so fiercely for a nation that treated them as second-class citizens. Looking back, the answer becomes clearer. They were determined to demonstrate their worth, and they did so with remarkable courage. The toll on the 761st Tank Battalion was immense. Nearly half of its members became casualties, reflecting the harsh realities of frontline combat. Families received grim notifications that their sons, husbands, and fathers had fallen, often while serving a country that denied them full rights as citizens. Yet, remarkably, many of the survivors rarely voiced anger or resentment over this paradox. Leonard Smith, who later joined the New York City transit system, reflected in a 1995 interview, "We were aware that the cause we fought for exceeded the discrimination we endured. We were striving for the America it could become, not the America that existed at the time." For decades, the story of the 761st remained largely hidden from mainstream historical accounts. When African American soldiers were mentioned, it was generally in reference to logistical or support roles rather than combat achievements. The critical contributions of fighting units like the 761st were often downplayed or overlooked. This began to shift during the 1972 as the civil rights movement brought renewed focus on recovering and celebrating African American history. Recognition increased with the 1978 Presidential Unit Citation, and the 1997 Medal of Honor ceremony brought further national attention. Today, the 761st Tank Battalion is celebrated as one of the most formidable armored units in the European theater. Their legacy is preserved in the curriculum at the U.S. Army Armor School, honored in military museums, and continues to serve as a point of study for historians and military professionals alike. The story of the 761st holds enduring relevance. It exemplifies how prejudice and systemic discrimination squander human talent. The U.S. Army's initial hesitation to deploy black soldiers in combat roles nearly deprived itself of one of the most effective tank battalions of the war. Despite facing both domestic discrimination and the lethal hostility of enemy forces, the men of the 761st distinguished themselves through exceptional skill, bravery, and resolve. Their accomplishments challenge us to confront our own biases and question assumptions that might limit human potential. If Nazi Germany, known for its military prowess, could be catastrophically mistaken about the capabilities of soldiers of different races, it prompts a reflection on which modern assumptions about ability and potential may also be unfounded. The combat record of the 761st became a compelling argument for desegregation in the armed forces. When President Harry S. Truman issued Executive Order 9981 in 1948 mandating the integration of the military, the proven effectiveness of units like the 761st was cited as clear evidence that racial segregation weakened operational efficiency. During the Korean War, integrated military units demonstrated outstanding performance, affirming the lessons of the 760: honest, competence, and valor are not bound by race. Several veterans of the 761st played advisory roles in this integration process, sharing insights from their first-hand experiences. After the war, the paths of 761st veterans diverged. Some, like Egg McConnell, leveraged the GI Bill to pursue higher education opportunities that would have been largely inaccessible before the war. Others continued to face systemic discrimination in employment and housing despite their military service, highlighting the persistent challenges of post-war America. The legacy of the 761st Tank Battalion endures as a testament to courage, skill, and the human spirit's capacity to overcome prejudice. Their story serves not only as a historical record but also as a continuing reminder of the costs of discrimination and the transformative potential of equality and opportunity. Warren Cressy endured years of post-traumatic stress disorder, previously referred to as combat fatigue, long after World War II had ended. Like many of his fellow soldiers, he seldom shared the details of what he had witnessed on the battlefield. It wasn't until 1978, when a Presidential Unit Citation was awarded, that many families finally grasped the full scale of their relatives' bravery and dedication. The complete history of the 761st Tank Battalion has been reconstructed from a variety of sources, including official U.S. Army documents, German military archives, personal correspondence, diaries, and interviews conducted decades later. Each of these sources contributes unique insights, creating a fuller picture of a unit that consistently operated under extreme and often perilous conditions. The official U.S. Army history, published in the 1952nd, barely acknowledged the contributions of the 760 honest. It required the efforts of independent historians as well as the veterans themselves to ensure that their experiences and achievements were properly documented and remembered. Today, the National Archives holds extensive records detailing the battalion's service, providing researchers and the general public access to this important history. One of the battalion's notable actions, the liberation of the Gunskirchen concentration camp, is commemorated at Yad Vashem, Israel's official Holocaust memorial. Survivors and their descendants have maintained ongoing relationships with the veterans and their families, recognizing the profound humanity demonstrated by the soldiers. In 2015, the Austrian government invited surviving members of the 761st to participate in ceremonies marking the 70th anniversary of the end of World War II. These veterans were honored not only as liberators but as men who upheld human dignity amidst unimaginable atrocities. The German forces, including Tigers and Panthers, had little expectation that the 761st Black Panthers would be effective in combat. Nazi ideology had long propagated the notion that African American soldiers were incapable of operating armored vehicles, lacked courage, and would retreat at the first sign of danger. What they encountered, however, was a unit whose members had trained extensively, fought tenaciously, and endured hardships greater than most other American units. The 761st not only contributed to the defeat of Nazi Germany, but also disproved the false beliefs embedded in racial ideology through their extraordinary performance in battle. During their 183 consecutive days of combat, the men of the 761st earned 7 Silver Stars, 246 Purple Hearts, and the Congressional Medal of Honor. Many of these awards were delayed for decades due to racial prejudice, and yet they represent only a portion of the courage and resilience demonstrated by the battalion. The 761st Tank Battalion endured these grueling operations not because they were immune to fatigue or losses. They suffered nearly 50% casualties, but because they carried the hopes and dignity of countless African Americans who, every Sherman tank they maneuvered in battle symbolized more than ammunition or firepower. It represented the weight of proof, the struggle for recognition, and the determination to demonstrate that competence and bravery transcend race. Each German position they overcame was a dual victory, a tactical success and a direct challenge to the racial prejudices of both their adversaries and their own country. For the German soldiers who faced them, the Black Panthers shattered long-held assumptions. Troops who had been indoctrinated to see African Americans as inferior encountered men whose skill, discipline, and courage were unmatched. Soldiers previously deemed incapable of managing complex machinery instead mastered the art of armored warfare. Ultimately, the 761st Tank Battalion's most significant achievement was not the towns they captured or the enemy tanks they destroyed, but their unambiguous demonstration that excellence and valor are defined by character, training, and determination, not skin color. Over 183 relentless days, they proved their capabilities against opponents who had underestimated them entirely. The legacy of the 761st Black Panthers endures beyond military history, continuing to inspire and affirm the ongoing struggle for equality and recognition. The German forces expected easy victories. Instead, they faced a unit whose skill and perseverance decisively disproved every prejudice they had been taught. The 760 honest service remains a testament to courage, resilience, and the unwavering pursuit of justice.